Hello, everyone. Good afternoon from the ones that are watching us from South Asia, and welcome to our second, nearly third webinar of this South Asia campaign. We are super happy to have you watching us today, and we have a very special guest for you to be inspired to write articles and to learn a lot about adaptation. So I will just let Nalini introduce everyone, and then I'm telling you more about it.
Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar. So with us we have today Mr. Shrey Goyal, who is one of the founders of the Sustainable Growth Initiative based out of New Delhi, and he's an engineer by training, and he's worked in social entrepreneurship and tech in the context of development, environment, and climate change for the past several years now. So today he'll be talking to us about his work and about his experiences and giving us a practical perspective about how adaptation is working on the ground. And as the moderators, we have today Anna, who has been coordinating and conducting all the webinars so far. She's our campaign manager. And myself, I'm the policy associate for Climate Tracker, and we will be leading this discussion today. So we hope you enjoy it, and let's start then. So before we dive into the merits of our discussion today, the first question I wanted to ask to you, Shrey, was that can you tell us more about the kind of work you do at the Sustainable Growth Initiative, and what is your role at the organization?
Yes. Can you hear me? Okay. Hi. So thank you for having me here. It's great to be part of this campaign, and I've been a fan of Climate Tracker's work for many years now. So as you mentioned in your introduction, I run an organization called the Sustainable Growth Initiative, and we work towards creating a sustainable and equitable future through providing advisory services that help confront the most complex sustainability challenges. And in particular, we focus on climate change action, energy security, and social equity. So we work with policymakers to help them incorporate energy security and sustainable development principles in their activities and planning through research and policy engagement. And we similarly work with companies and social entrepreneurs to help develop new technologies, to work on new markets, and all of this within the context of development and to help us transition to a low carbon economy. So that's broadly what we do at SGI.
Thank you. That's like really interesting. You have like so many actors combined together, and I'm sure this is like a great challenge as well. So it looks like really intersectional to me. I see that your work has to do a lot of like development and environment. And since this webinar is about climate change adaptation, how would you put this in context for your work?
So, so personally, my own motivation and the motivation of my organization is to create a more sustainable world. Is to create a world which can grow sustainably, and we see that climate change is a reality. Climate change is something that is going to happen, that is happening, that is touching the lives of literally billions of people across the globe already. And if the world is to grow sustainably, if we are to maintain a certain, at least a basic minimum standard of living for all people, then adaptation to climate change is very, very important for us to go forward. Without because climate change is already wreaking havoc in the lives of farmers, in the lives of low-income communities, in the lives of people everywhere in developing and developed countries. And so we see adaptation as a very important part of our work.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that. And we are hoping that you can add a lot of more insight about the kind of specific instances you've come across with respect to adaptation over your work. So, can you tell us about maybe a specific project or initiative that your organization has worked on for climate adaptation with a core focus of just adaptation?
So I can discuss a couple of projects here. So one of our first projects was we were the lead modelers for a tool called the India Energy Security Scenarios 2047 tool, and we developed this tool for the Industrial Planning Commission of India, which is now called the NITI Aayog. And we work with several international bodies like the International Energy Agency, OECD, and the UK and US government and several ministries here. The idea of the tool was to help policymakers understand the impact of climate change on the economy over several decades until the year 2047, in fact, and then accordingly plan their policy. So to a certain extent, it was a mitigation tool, but it was also an adaptation tool because we worked on projecting how climate change is going to change the economy. So we looked at how climate change is going to change agricultural outputs, how it's going to affect energy consumption, how it's going to affect energy generation, and it's a very complicated set of equations because the forces of food crisis, energy crisis, and water crisis, all three of them interact with each other in very complicated ways. So climate change is essentially a complex problem, and adaptation is that makes adaptation something very difficult to plan for. So it is something that you require a lot of data for and a lot of cooperation for. So several policymakers, entrepreneurs, and community bodies had to come together to understand and to work out scenarios for dealing with climate change. So this was one tool where, although we did not directly work with the community, but we worked with policymakers on how to make better plans to adapt to climate change. So we try to project what kind of impacts climate change will have on health outcomes, what kind of impacts will it have in terms of natural disasters, and what the economy will have to prepare for. And accordingly, we talk to industry groups and social entrepreneurs in how their work will have to change over the years to adapt to climate change. So that's one example, and there are several others that I can also discuss.
Thank you for that. There was a bit of a connection problem for a while, but it was better in the end. I hope people got the main part of it, hopefully. So I will just move on to the next question. But before, I thought it would be a good idea to remind people how they can send questions. So if you are listening to us and you want to send us a question, at the very end of the webinar, we will post them to our speaker today. So the only thing you have to do is either go to our Google Hangouts page where you're watching this webinar and put it as a comment. You will see that as Climate Tracker we are telling you how to do it. Or if you prefer to use Twitter, and we've seen that some of you are doing that, you only have to either tag us on Twitter using @ClimateTracking, which is our name as Climate Tracker, or you could use the hashtag #ClimateTracker, and we will read your questions and send them to our speaker today. So yeah, I hope we received so many interesting questions because he is like really interested. And aside from that, let's just move to the next question. That was my advertising moment. So the next question would be, yeah, you said that, like, there's many stakeholders, and it's very important to link policymakers, entrepreneurs, like many different aspects to come to climate change adaptation. And we see that adaptation is really linked with gender and also inequality. And inequality, I believe, is something very important as well for the region, for South Asia. So maybe you have come across of like adaptation practices that are linked with gender or that overlap with adaptation and inequality. Like, how have you seen that this mix and ties together? Shrey, are you here? We can't hear you now, or at least I can't. Maybe there's some like technical problems with your microphone or something. Sorry, the ones you're watching us. There's always a problem when you do a live webinar. So you can start thinking questions meanwhile. Keep on trying, like we will for sure at the point hear you.
Hello? Is this
Yes.
working now? Hello?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay, great.
Great.
I'm sorry for that. As you said, there's always a problem when you do a live event. So I'll just start again. Yes, as I was saying, so climate change adaptation has a lot to do with gender and with gender inequality across the globe, and especially in developing countries. And this is something that I've seen in context of various projects over there. In particular, I'd like to talk about the Bungru project. That's BHUNGRO, Bungru. So the Bungru project is a project by Nairita Services Private Limited, which is a company based in Gujarat, in India. And we have partnered with them on this project, my organization, SGI. So Bungru is a project that links water access and climate change adaptation with women's rights. In several districts in Gujarat as well as elsewhere across India and across the world, there are several regions which face flooding during one part of the year, and the same region during a different part of the year faces drought. So this is a unique problem and a relatively unique problem. These are regions where farmers have been practicing traditional forms of agriculture for centuries, but they've never faced these issues, and it is clearly a product of anthropogenic climate change. So what we saw in these regions was that farmers were unable to cultivate their lands during the monsoon season when the land would be flooded, and the flooding itself would cause salination of the soil, which would then make the land infertile for cultivating during the other seasons. And then during the drought seasons, there would be no water, so again cultivation would be very difficult. This problem affects hundreds of millions of farmers across the world, and it's something that was driving poverty across these regions. That was affecting the livelihoods of these farmers. What we found was that this problem in particular affected women farmers, because whenever there is an access issue, especially access to natural resources or community resources, then women are the first, so to speak, minority group that are cut off access from community-owned resources. So women farmers face greater difficulties in accessing loans. Women farmers, women-led households were amongst the first households who were driven into poverty. Women were more likely to lose access to whatever water resources were available and so on. And what Mr. Biplab Paul, who's the who's the founder of Nairita Services, so what he did was he worked with women farmers, and he formed groups of 4 women each, and he gave them control of the locally available Bungru site. So Bungru was a water harvesting system that he developed over the years, which involves underground reservoir, and it's a very low cost technology as compared to, let's say, water harvesting and so on. So creating underground reservoir which can store water during the rainy season, and then the same water can be used during the drought season to water the fields. So water is a very, very important resource in those regions, and by linking this issue with gender equality, what Biplab Paul did was he essentially created a new economically empowered role for women in these communities. So these communities, which were often in regions of India which were male dominated, where women faced issues of access and of social equality, uh, by gaining ownership of the Guru project and by getting the legal right to decide who gets how much water, and by getting the legal expertise and the technical expertise of owning this project, these women, their role in society completely changed. So for the first time in many of these places, women entrepreneurs and women leaders would step out of their homes and make these important decisions for the community. Many of these women partners that we worked with also started their own other businesses. Some of them went on to occupy positions of leadership in local governments and in local government structures. So as we've learned in other development programs like microfinance and the success story, uh, women are like development workers that are present in every household. So if you empower the woman in a particular household, you automatically raise the household nutrition levels, you automatically raise the household education levels, and so on. So through this project, over the period of about a decade, we've seen that by working with women, we've been able to uh, implement the project itself very successfully, and it has enabled the whole community to deal with the challenges of climate change, to adapt better to climate change, as well as uh, to produce better development outcomes. Um, so yeah,
Thanks, Shrey.
that's
So,
that comes from. Yeah.
thank you so much for that discussion on gender and adaptation. There was, I think, a lot of static in the middle. I think I'm not sure most of our trackers got several of the details. I think there's a problem with the microphone. Can you, I think, can you adjust it or like keep it still? I think if you move the microphone, there's a lot of static. So is there any way you can keep it stationary? I think if you keep the microphone stationary, it's better. So
Okay.
yeah.
Is this better?
Yeah, much better. So because that's because there was some really useful and important points in that speech, and we want to make sure everyone hears them right. So could you do a quick recap once again of some of the points that you mentioned with respect to gender and adaptation, just so that we make sure everyone has it on record?
Yes, I'll just do that, and sorry for the interruptions. I hope it's more clear now. So what I was discussing was how in several projects, especially in developing countries and in rural areas in particular, uh, we've seen that gender inequality issues often intersect with climate change adaptation issues, and we saw that this was primarily because because climate change often leads to resource scarcity. So whether it's resource like water or land availability, or any other kind of energy availability, any kind of natural resource management issue, women are always the first community to be cut off from that particular resource. This has been a common experience. So, for example, women entrepreneurs and women farmers find it much more difficult to get access to finance. Women are also, whenever resources become more scarce, women are usually the first communities to be cut off access to, because male-dominated societies often have male leaders deciding who gets access to what resource, and so on. So adaptation to climate change has a lot to do with promoting women leadership, and we found that communities can adapt to climate change if they bring forward their women leaders, and so on. And one example of this that I was giving was Kungru, and I'll just summarize what I said earlier, and we can share links and other resources with the listeners later on. So Guru is a project that was started in Gujarat in Western India, where very commonly we see that in many districts there are floods in one part of the year, and the same regions that were flooded then face droughts in a different part of the year. So in both of these times of the year, flooding, the floods and the droughts, farmers are unable to cultivate land, and as a result, that affects livelihoods, that has driven farmers to poverty, and that affects communities as a whole. So we found that so Vipul Paul, the founder of Nagarika Services in Gujarat, he developed a system by which water could be stored underground, not under water table, which is what is done water harvesting, but through much more low cost method. And this resource of water can then be harnessed during the droughts. So during flood, the water could seep into this underground reservoir, which would enable cultivation while the rest of the region is flooded. And then the same water can be harnessed back. Now this was the technical innovation, but the social innovation on top of this was that this resource, the water that was created, this is very valuable for the community, for a farming community. Water is money, water is life. So what Mr. Pollard and what Medical Services did was they created groups of 4 to 5 women in every village who were then trained to maintain and to basically to continue the project after Medical Services leaves, and they were given the legal right to decide who gets how much water. So this gave women a position of leadership in society. This gave them this empowered them economically, and this also meant, and what was interesting for us in this project was that not only did the men did the women have to be trained on
I
how
think
to.
there's still crackling again. I think we can't follow you again. There's again a lot of crackling. So I don't know if there's any other electronic device which is interfering with the signal or something. But
Okay, yeah, I'll put my phone away. Maybe that'll
yeah,
help. Sorry, go on.
maybe. No, it's totally fine. But yeah, we got a lot of interesting points, especially I hope our trackers followed the details of the Ghungru project, which Shrey will be sharing with us after the webinar about how they are working with women, especially because women are the primary stakeholders in adaptation, because the job of adapting usually at the household level, at the domestic level, and at the agricultural level, because of the amount of female labor in agriculture in South Asia, is very crucial to this debate on climate adaptation. So thank you so much for that, Shrey. Up for our next question, like we discussed, you're an engineer from one of the best institutes in the country, from IIT Kharagpur. So obviously you've had a lot of interaction with technology and science over the past few years in your environmental work. So could you give us some examples that are used on ground for adaptation, where there's been innovation at the in the tech field to deal with changing climatic conditions?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, right from the beginning of my career, so when I was a student back at IIT Kharagpur, my first big project there itself was working on a biomass solar hybrid project that would help electrify villages. It was called the Urja project, and we were supported by Shoka, and we were supported by several other organizations, and we worked on a couple of villages in the West Bengal area. And ever since then, most of my work has been around development and climate change, as you said. A lot of it had to do with using technical innovations for this. So I mean, there are many projects that come to mind. I think a very commonly found example of that would be organizations that use renewable energy technologies or other kind of new and conventional technologies to work with poor communities who have lost access to their existing forms of energy due to the energy crisis, or who otherwise shifted the way they do agriculture, and as a result, there are new forms of agricultural waste and agricultural products that are now useful for creating biomass energy and so on. So there are organizations like Selco who've been doing it for almost 2 decades now, and there are newer projects. There is Project Boom, which works in Rajasthan on empowering decentralized energy generation with the rural households. And besides that, uh, what could also be what is also innovative that I've seen in India and that has not received much coverage by the media is there is a project in Assam which works on giving the community. Hello, am I audible now? Hello, hello, Nalini?
Yeah, but it's still a bit like difficult to understand. So I'm not sure if it's problem of the microphone or I don't know.
I don't know. Is it any better now?
No, not really. It's like something is like interrupting the every word, so it's like difficult to guess exactly what you're saying if the conversation is long actually.
Okay, wait. Let me just take off the headphones. That might help actually. Just let me know if there's any improvement.
Maybe.
Now?
Okay, try it again.
Hello? Maybe.
No, not really. I don't know if you have a microphone in your laptop, so you can just not use this one, but I'm not sure what other solution there is.
Yeah, maybe I can try that. Just, I'm very sorry to the other listeners because of technical issues at my end. Okay, is this any better? Is it different now? Am I more audible now?
Yeah, I think this is better actually. We may try with this one if you don't mind, and see
Okay.
if it works. Okay, it's a bit it's a bit less strong the voice, but it's like more clear, so that's fine. Great.
Yeah, I'll just be a little louder.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. So
I
will.
was
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So I was talking about other innovations in climate change adaptation which use technology. So there are several energy projects that I've seen which work with low-income communities and give them access to decentralized energy through solar or through biomass-based energy. Uh, what is also a remarkable project is there's a project in Gujarat, sorry, in Assam. Uh, it's headed by a number of bodies. ICI mode is one of the bodies concerned, where there are stations set up in villages and several mountain communities, which give alerts to villagers a few hours in advance if there's a flood or if there's a landslide or if there are other climate related extreme weather events happening. So extreme weather events are a big problem in the mountainous regions and in the Himalayan communities in Assam and other northeastern states of India. And by using technology at a relatively low cost, villagers can now be given alerts to evacuate way in advance. And this has been used a number of times. It has been very useful, and it has helped many communities over the past few years. And this innovation was uh, perfected and funded by an international group of experts. So I think it's a really beautiful story of adaptation and of several different partners coming together to work with the community.
Great. Now I heard it perfectly and understood the very beautiful story. So that's awesome. Thank you. And I'm sure everybody is listening to you better now. So after this story about more like technology and engineering, we would like to talk also about policies. So maybe do you know international techniques, policies, or things that should be replicated or experimented in South Asia, and you want to share it with us, or other examples of policies or techniques that you think are very valuable for the region?
Yeah. So, in the context of India in particular, I think the biggest policy innovation in the last decade or so that has really helped us adapt to climate change, and it has in fact worked on adaptation and mitigation both, is our policy innovations surrounding adaptation of renewable energy. So, starting with the JNNURM, the Jawaharlal Nehru, sorry, JNNSM, the Jawaharlal Nehru National Solar Mission. So JNNSM was a huge success in uh, in uh, in advancing adaptation of solar in India, and that in turn has helped communities across India access energy in a relatively cheap way, and it has spurred many new entrepreneurs to go into energy. So in general, policy innovations that give new entrepreneurs better access to resources, to financial resources, and policy innovations that ease uh, the way entrepreneurs work with governments. So I think those are some big policy innovations that can help South Asia deal with climate change. Besides that, there are a number of innovations in there are a number of innovations in agricultural policies that can take place and that have happened across the world and that are applicable to South Asia. So uh, climate change makes agriculture a much more difficult uh, form of livelihood to pursue, and that is felt across South Asia. So farmers are so there's a huge population of subsistence farmers and small landholding farmers in South Asia who often need access to better financial resources, and because of the way irrigation is not present across India, because of the way irrigation is essentially a luxury in the farming community. So very often agriculture becomes a gamble of monsoon. So if you look at India's gross domestic product, India's output as a whole, it varies according to the intensities of monsoon every year. Now, in many parts of the world, innovative policy mechanisms and innovative products in finance have helped deal with this crisis. So there are several interesting agricultural insurance schemes, crop insurance schemes that have been tried across the world. Uh, there are microfinance institutions which are partnering with bigger financial institutions in parts of Africa and South America. In particular, there is a very innovative agricultural insurance product that is being used in Latin America. Again, I can share the links after the webinar. And I think many of those innovations would find uh, would find use in South Asia as well. So they can help. So essentially, we need to work with our low-income communities to give them a safety net when their livelihoods are affected by climate change. That is an essential part of climate change adaptation, where innovative policy and finance mechanisms can help.
Thanks so much, Shrey. I think that's a very, very important point that we've so yeah, that you brought up, because we've noticed that most of our adaptation discussion tends to be around disaster management and disaster relief, but we very rarely focus on creating financial safety nets for people who we know are going to definitely be you know facing climate adaptation. We're always trying to save them through disaster relief or etc. But we haven't worked on our financial schemes as much. I think you worked with the UNIS Foundation for a while. So would you like to discuss some maybe progressive financial instruments that you have worked on or seen in practice that could be definitely replicated by state governments and local, regional, municipal corporations?
Yes, absolutely. Financial innovations that can help with climate change adaptations can come in a variety of packages, and there are some successful examples in India as well. I think a huge problem in South Asia in general, even outside of the climate change adaptation sphere, is the lack of social security. So most labor is present in unorganized forms and so on, and climate change only compounds this problem further. So financial inclusion is a similar problem that again compounds the problem of climate change adaptation. So there are some states who have better financial structures than others that help low-income populations deal with climate change. So, as an example, Karnataka actually has an excellent system where farmers and other rural populations can get finance to buy products that help them with income generation opportunities. And many of these schemes have been used by social entrepreneurs to help low-income populations get access to tools that help them fight climate change. So solar entrepreneurs have made use of Karnataka's state-level structures and banking systems a lot. Similarly, Maharashtra has some admirable cooperative banking systems. So cooperative banking is something that has found great utility, and again, it has helped poor communities in various parts of Maharashtra to deal with climate change, to get access to better agricultural products and so on. Besides that, there are there's also, I mean, microfinance has been a very popular and a successful, well, controversially successful, but successful nonetheless, intervention, development intervention in, especially in South Asia. And as you mentioned, I've had the opportunity to work with the Grameen Creative Lab, which is now called Social Business India, and Grameen itself started in Bangladesh, and even though Grameen and Professor Yunus himself are best known for their work in microfinance, but what is remarkable is how Grameen has been able to use that structure to create one of the largest solar companies in the world. So Bangladesh has an extremely high rate of adaptation of solar energy, and most of that has been used by through the Grameen network. So microfinance is unique in the way it has gone to the last mile in terms of access to low-income populations, and I believe entrepreneurs as well as state agencies which are looking to reach to the lowest sections of the community for climate change adaptation schemes and climate change adaptation technologies and tools, they should be able to partner with microfinance institutions and make use of that excellent infrastructure to be able to spread that innovation. So it's actually not uncommon to see mobile phone companies partner with microfinance institutions to help sell mobile phones. So since this route is already being used commercially, it can definitely be used for improving development outcomes and for climate change adaptation.
Thank you. And that comes to our super important question, which is, well, this is very important, and our trackers, I'm sure they love to hear about all these practices, policies, issues related to climate change adaptation. But as you know, we are also communicators, and you are as well. You are like a Twitter master, as I've seen, but also like wrote for like some of the best places in your country. So now I would ask you, and that's maybe something that the trackers are interested in. It's what do you think journalists in South Asia should be focusing on with respect to climate change adaptation? What stories, what angles, what do you suggest to them?
Thank you so much for asking that question. I think anyone working on development issues, any social entrepreneur, and every policy leader in India has a lot to say about this because and feels very strongly about this, as do I, because we feel that climate change is something that touches and that is going to touch the life of practically everyone living in this region. So that's that's almost 1/3 of the global population, and we often feel that this topic is not covered nearly enough by journalists in South Asia. So as an example, actually most of the projects that I discussed with you on this webinar, including the Bungru project, including the Assam flood evacuation system, including most projects from South Asia that I've seen and admired over the years, almost none of them get any local coverage at all. So what was some of these projects, they received the Momentum for Change Award from the UNFCCC at the climate change conferences in Lima and in Paris. Uh, and I was a part of these groups both the time to travel to those places to receive the awards and to talk to leaders from other countries on adaptation. And we were really surprised to see that journalists from other countries, mostly from developed countries, from Europe and from the US, were much more interested in covering our stories than journalists from South Asia. So you can actually see some of the best journalism with regards to climate change adaptation and climate change mitigation with regards uh, to uh, to rural India, with regards to social entrepreneurship in newspapers like The Guardian and the BBC, in New York Times, even in the Wall Street Journal. And you're much less likely to come across such stories in Indian publications. I mean, there are exceptions, of course. The Hindu has been excellent in covering development journalism, but in general, I would urge uh, journalists and trackers and budding journalists who are interested in climate change to to meet social entrepreneurs, to meet communities, to visit rural India and to cover these issues. So because and journalists have a very important role to play. Uh, Part of it is due to the fact that uh, for policy changes to happen uh, in climate change adaptation and mitigation, more and more people need to be aware of it. More and more people need to know that it is a problem, that it is affecting us, that it is going to affect us. And secondly, it's also that the way these innovations spread, the way these innovations scale, is because of journalism. So as I said, the Bungru project on which we worked, we were mainly working in Gujarat and a bit in Karnataka and Maharashtra. But after receiving some local coverage, we then received inquiries from across India because there were other people and other farmers and other cooperative groups in other parts of India who saw our product, and then they said that, oh, we have similar problems and we would like to get in touch with you. So innovations can scale only when people share these with each other, and journalists have a vital role to play in that. Similarly, uh, climate change denial is a problem that some countries in the West are facing now, and we don't want a future in which India faces that issue. So more and more people need to know how big a problem climate change is, and I really hope that there is a future in which climate change becomes as important a topic of political discussion as caste or religion in India. So again, for that to happen, it's our journalists who have to act. So journalists must share stories stories of the truth, of stories of what's happening, how people are affected, and also stories of hope, of social entrepreneurs and grassroots level grassroots level development workers who are putting in great efforts at changing the state of climate change adaptation. Thank you. What to you, Anna?
Thanks so much, Shrey. That was a really inspiring speech, and we hope that our trackers were listening in. And it's a very important point that you mentioned, that the strongest stories about South Asia, usually by foreign journalists and by foreign publications. So there is a massive void in the climate journalism sector in India, but there is so much that needs to be written about, and we are hoping that this conference and this campaign leading up to the conference is going to help create at least a tiny dent in that void. So next, before we open the house completely, we've already received one question from one of our trackers. This is Vishwendra Pawar, and he sent us a question regarding what are your thoughts on climate change displacement, as there have been cases in Sundarbans and parts of Bangladesh where because of rising sea levels, people are forced to move. How should we plan the resettlement policy, or in case the project is funded by the World Bank, since they have their own standards of resettlement? Are those standards being followed, or is it largely ignored irrespective of the funding criteria? So since the people who are affected are from a very poor background. So that's his question. We'd like to know what you think about it, since you have worked even with initiatives in Bangladesh as well, and you have some experience regarding international funding schemes, etc. So what is your perspective on this question?
Thank you. That's an excellent question, and in fact, that question reminds me of something very important regarding the climate change development intersection that I've missed, that I should have mentioned earlier. It's that one of the biggest challenges that's upcoming with regards to climate change is with regards to climate change, displacement due to climate change, and more generally climate refugees, as we are calling them now. This is especially going to be. This is already becoming a problem in the Sundarbans, as you mentioned, and there are. I mean, across the world, there are whole countries which are looking at being displaced and so on. So, climate migration and climate refugees is a big problem that honestly we are completely unprepared for right now, and that we have to be more prepared for. In general, Bangladesh and the Sundarbans are one of the first affected areas in South Asia. In fact, a very interesting story from the Sundarbans region is that there was an island in the Sundarbans delta called the New Moor Island, and the trackers can also look it up. The New Moor Island was actually a point of dispute between India and Bangladesh governments for decades, ever since Bangladesh independence. It has been subject to dispute because India claimed ownership to that island, and that was mainly regarding because ownership of the island would imply ownership of territorial waters and so on. And in 2006, I think, or around 2006 or 2008, the island disappeared. The island submerged in water because of the rising sea levels due to climate change. So thankfully, there's no dispute anymore. But this also illustrates the horrible truth of climate change. And I mean, the whole island. If whole islands are disappearing, then where are we going to live, and how, and what that says about the future of the populations of Sundarbans. So there have been there is, as you mentioned, there is a project funded by the World Bank, and they have their own standards for resettlement policy. I have myself worked for the World Bank previously on an education project, and again, while there are several points of view regarding the role of international development agencies and development, and regarding how they regarding if they're fair, or there are several political positions here. But in general, I think the involvement of World Bank, I think it's a good idea because they have huge funds, they have huge resources, and the bank usually does have its own mechanisms to keep track of their projects, and there is an independent unit within the World Bank, the IEG, the Independent Evaluation Group, which usually follows up and performs evaluations. So in general, I would, I mean, I haven't looked into this particular case in depth, But in general, if I had to make an assumption, I would say that the bank and most international agencies of that stature are usually pretty strict in terms of following standards, and they usually perform in-depth impact evaluations later on and follow up regularly. So I think we can trust that. But to that, I would add that once again, this is also a place where journalists can play a very important role. So, for example, this was something that we saw during Narega. So journalists have brought forward examples of when Narega worked and when Narega did not work. For anyone who's not aware, Narega is India's National Rural Employment Guarantee Arm, the NREGS, which was a massive scheme by the government of India to to guarantee employment to every low-income household in India. And similarly, if more journalists would be covering this, then that would ensure greater accountability from all parties concerned. So I think journalists should be covering this in greater depth. Nalini?
Thank you very much for the answer. I'm sure the tracker that is asking this question will be really happy to hear your response, and hopefully you'll write about this. As you said, it's very important for people to communicate that as well. So I will just give a final overview of our campaign for everyone who's watching us, just in case for making the small details and the questions you will have a bit more understandable. So as you know, like everyone knows that we are here because the South Asia campaign, and that's a campaign that we are running because we will do a conference basically in South Asia that will happen between the 14th and the 16th of October in Sri Lanka. So you only like to participate or to be eligible to participate, you only have to submit one article via our app. I'm sure you've seen banners in our social media, but it's basically app.climatetracker.org, and there you just sign in and you can submit your article. And this article has to be about the topics we were talking today, so about adaptation, South Asia, and local initiatives, or whatever you feel like writing. So the deadline for this, so you have to write and publish your article before the 16th, which is next Tuesday, if I'm not wrong. And we will just let you know who are shortlisted and just start picking people who will fly to Sri Lanka with us in October. So it's not only this conference. This conference will happen, as I said, from the 14th to the 16th, but then there will be another conference, which is the 5th Asia-Pacific Climate Change Adaptation Forum. And we will first be trained in our climate change small conference, and then we will join this forum to put in practice the journalism skills that we have gained. This is a very short summary, but everything is in the website. So if you go to climatetracker.org or follow us in social media, you have all the details. There's even a frequently asked questions for you to if you have any doubts, or you can just reach out to us and we will try to answer your questions. So I hope to receive a lot of articles during this weekend until next week, and maybe we can send Shrey the best ones that are related to his webinar or something. And that's all from my side. Just feel free to reach out if you don't have clear what we have to do, or just didn't understand some of the details of this campaign. And I will just leave it to Mrinalini now.
Thanks, Anna, for that quick summary. I hope our trackers are geared up now for the last leg of our campaign, and they're in complete crunch mode, writing out brilliant articles that we can receive over the next week. So before we close for today, I'd like to thank Shrey for joining us today. It was wonderful having you and listening to your thoughts and experiences, and I'm sure that our trackers are have benefited from your discussion today. So thank you once again for joining us, and we hope that we can work with you again at Climate Tracker. So thanks again.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, and my apologies for the technical issues caused. I would like to add that I will be sharing links, and I hope you can share them with climate trackers, and also anyone who wishes to know anything more about the projects that I've mentioned, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or through Climate Tracker. I'm sure we can facilitate some of those discussions. And yeah, and thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to engaging with you and with the trackers in the future as well. Thanks.
Thank you. We will do that for sure. If you send us links, we will post them for the trackers to have them. And that's all, everyone. Thank you for being here.